Hey, hello, Mama,
Hello.
and anybody else who might watch this. um, Welcome to Bible Talk Live with myself, Daniel Rizza. This is my lovely wife, Rachel.
Hello.
We're going to be reading John chapter 18 tonight. I only got through the first 14 verses.
Okay.
Um,
I read the whole thing, but
Yeah, I
most
read
of
it,
the
but-
stuff I wrote down focused on the beginning, so we can read the beginning if you want.
you can read whatever.
I didn't write anything down for anything past, I think, verse 14. You're right. So
I didn't even read after 28. I read up through Peter's second denial and third denial,
Okay.
but I didn't take any notes on it.
Okay. Well,
So let's read up to 14. We'll see where that takes us.
hold on. Let me see something.
Did you read it, Mama?
No, I did. Let's just read the whole thing.
Let's read the whole
Yeah,
chapter.
I did. I do think I wrote some other things, but it's okay. All right.
All right. This is Jesus he just prayed for his disciples and for himself and for
All
all
believers.
believers to come. And then he's headed to the Garden of Gethsemane. In John, it's interesting. The prayer doesn't necessarily happen in the garden. It might not have. But the next chapter, he goes to the garden, and that's where he's going to get arrested and taken to Caiaphas. All right, I'm going to pray. You ready?
Okay.
Caiaphas. Thanks, Jesus, for this time and for the word that you've given us. I pray, Lord, that we can learn something from it. I thank you for anybody that is listening. I pray that they would come to know who you are without delay. Amen.
All right, chapter 18. I'll start. When he had finished praying, Jesus left his disciples and crossed the Kidron Valley. On the other side, there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now Judas, who betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. So Judas came to the grove, guiding a detachment of soldiers and some officials from the chief priests and Pharisees. They were carrying torches, lanterns, and weapons. Jesus, knowing all that was going to happen to him, went out and asked them, "Who is it that you want?" Who is it you want? Jesus of Nazareth, they repeated. "I am he," Jesus said, and Judas, the traitor, was standing there with them. When Jesus said, "I am he," they drew back and fell to the ground. Again he asked them, "Who is it you want?" And they said, "Jesus of Nazareth." "I told you that I am he," Jesus answered. "If you are looking for me, then let these men go." This happened so that the words he had spoken would be fulfilled. "I have not lost one of those you gave me." Then Simon Peter, who had a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant, cutting off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. Jesus commanded Peter, "Put your sword away. Shall I not drink the cup the Father has given me?" Your turn.
You keep reading.
No, you keep going.
I mean, there's lots of other. I figure
We
we
can
could
take
break
turns.
it. Oh, we're only going to 14 then, maybe so. Oh no, we're reading the whole thing. Sorry
Go
for
ahead.
the confusion. Verse 12. Then the detachment of soldiers with its commander and the Jewish officials arrested Jesus. They bound him and brought him first to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who had advised the Jewish leaders that it would be good if one man died for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple were following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard, but Peter had to wait outside at the door. The other disciple who was known to the high priest came back, spoke to the servant girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. You aren't one of this man's disciples, too, are you? She asked Peter. He replied, "I am not." It was cold, and the servants and officials stood around a fire they had made to keep warm. Peter was also standing with them, warming himself.
You want me to go?
I guess.
Meanwhile, the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and his teaching. I have spoken openly to the world, Jesus replied. I always taught in synagogues or at the temple, where all the Jews come together. I said nothing in secret. Why question me? Ask those who heard me. Surely they know what I said. When Jesus said this, one of the officials nearby struck him in the face. Is this the way you answer the high priest? He demanded. If I said something wrong, Jesus replied, testify as to what is wrong. But if I spoke the truth, why did you strike me? Then Annas sent him, still bound, to Caiaphas the high priest. As Simon Peter stood warning himself, he was asked, You are not one of the disciples, are you? He denied it, saying, I am not. One of the high priest's servants, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, challenged him. Did I see you with him in the olive grove? Again, Peter denied it. At that moment, a rooster began to crow. Dun, dun, dun.
Jesus before Pilate. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't read that. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. Wait.
What's the matter?
The high priest questions Jesus.
Hmm?
In verse 20, it's Annas, right?
Okay.
Yeah, because then 24 says, take him to the high priest. Take him to Caiaphas in 24, but then 28 says, then Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas. So there's no story in John of Jesus and Caiaphas. It's just Jesus and Annas. Because they said in verse 24, take him to Caiaphas. And then in verse 28, then they went from Caiaphas to Pilate. I just noticed that as I'm reading it now. Then the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor. By now it was early morning, and to avoid ceremonial uncleanness, they did not enter the palace because they wanted to be able to eat the Passover, period. So Pilate came out to them and asked, what charges are you bringing against this man? If he were not a criminal, they replied, we would not have handed him over to you. Pilate said, take him yourselves and judge him by your own law. But we have no right to execute anyone, they objected. This took place to fulfill what Jesus had said about the kind of death he was going to die. Pilate then went back inside the palace, summoned Jesus, and asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Is that your own idea? Jesus asked, or did others talk to you about me? Am I a Jew? Pilate replied. Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What is it you have done? Jesus said, my kingdom is not of this world. If it were, my servants would fight to prevent my arrest by the Jewish leaders. But now my kingdom is from another place. You are a king then, said Pilate. Jesus answered, you say that I am a king. In fact, the reason I was born and came into this world is to testify to the truth. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. What is truth? Pilate retorted. With this, he went out again to the Jews and gathered there and said, I find no basis for a charge against him, but it is your custom for me to release to you one prisoner at the time of the Passover. Do you want me to release the king of the Jews? No, they shouted back. No, not him. They shouted back, no, not him. Give us Barabbas. Now Barabbas had taken part in an uprising. So weird.
Okay.
Way to finish the sentence.
So mine says rebellion. Okay, so I said, and we've said this before, like, it's so easy for me to read this and be like, why is he saying that? Why would he do that? But we have the whole story here and we know what happens, like, it's so easy for me to just sit there and question any of their actions when I know the story. But if I was in that place, who knows what I would have done or what you would have done, So I just wrote down, I'm trying to put myself in that situation and think what it would have actually been like to be there and to be in this situation. Like, it was probably really like...
Needing a person in the crowd?
Or any of them. Like, let's say you were one of the disciples or someone in the crowd or,
Or Pilate.
Right. I'm sure that the tensions were high. Mm-hmm. Things were a little crazy. Here's Judas has already betrayed him, right? And now he shows up with like a bunch of soldiers and some weapons. Like, if you show up with an army of people with weapons, like, tensions are high, you know? So I just was trying to think about, like, what would it actually be like to be there, and not just be like, oh yeah, okay. You know, Jesus keeps saying, I'm he, and they keep asking the same question, like, are you king of the Jews? Yes, I'm he. Like, you know, they're not listening to him. And things are just tense and crazy right now. So yeah, that was my first kind of just quick observation.
Okay.
So
I noticed that Judas leaves the entourage a couple chapters earlier, in chapter 13, in when they're having the Passover dinner.
Yeah, I went back to that too.
Yeah, when Jesus was like, the guy who dips his here, you know, so he tells Judas, go and do what you got to do, so that something can be fulfilled or whatever. And Judas leaves. You know, he goes to go betray him, and then they finish dinner. Jesus prays, and then Jesus goes to this place. And Judas knows of this place because they've been there before. He's familiar with it. And so in verse 2, now Judas, who had betrayed him, knew the place because Jesus had often met there with his disciples. And I also made a note later on, I think, that so the Pharisees have been wanting to catch Jesus and kill him for a while now. And the only time they get an opportunity is when Jesus is in the temple or in the crowd, and he's not just talking he's talking with the Jewish leaders, but the people are there. And they're like, hey, hang on a second, this guy sounds like he's got something to say that's worthwhile. And so it's harder for the Jewish leaders to arrest him and do what they want to actually do with him. But here they have an opportunity because there is no crowd. The guards are able to catch him, you know, at nighttime when there's nobody around, right? So
right. A lot of times in the previous chapters, they're like, oh, he slipped away.
Yeah,
you know.
Fell into the crowd. They couldn't catch him. So they needed a non-public place to arrest Jesus. And I asked the question why, but I just answered it. So never mind.
Yeah, so I went back to, so here Peter's denied him 3 times, right? And I wrote down, you know, because earlier they say, you know, you before the rooster crows 3 times. And I wrote down, as someone who knows what it's like to have a rooster, it doesn't take a rooster very long.
That's true.
To crow 3 times.
Yeah.
It happens very quickly. So, like, that's all I have to say about that. And, you know, people think, oh, roosters just crow in the morning. No, that's not true. They crow.
And they crow early.
Early.
And this all happened at night.
Right.
You know, and into the early morning.
You know, like maybe 4 a.m.
Yeah.
Ugh. So, I also want to flip back because, you know, Peter denies him 3 times. And then if we flip back to, when you guys know the story, we just read it, but in John chapter 13, verse 37, Peter swears he's going to lay his life down for him, right? Well, let's start in verse 36. 36, Simon Peter asked him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus replied, where I am going, you cannot follow now, but you will follow later, right? He wanted to go where he was going. Peter asked, Lord, why can't I follow you now? I will lay down my life for you, right? He keeps saying, I will lay down my life for you. And then how the tables have turned. And again, I go back to, it's easy for me to say, like, well, why did he do that? Because I have this whole book. I know how the story ends, right? I know what happens. I'm like, man, why did he do that? But I wrote, how many times have I said I was going to do something and then I changed my mind, right? I do it, you do it, we all do it. And then I put, how many times have I let others down? You know, sometimes not on purpose. Other times I do it knowingly, and then that's not good, right? We all let people down. And then I said, am I willing to lay down my life for Christ and do whatever he asks me to do? These are some.
Yeah, it should be. You know, it's interesting you made that comment about letting down. Because I don't think that Peter let Jesus down in this scenario.
Well, he said, I will lay down my life for you.
He said
Right.
that, but Jesus also said that you're going to deny me 3 times.
Right.
So he's
But
fulfilling.
before Jesus said that, Peter was like, I'm going to do this. Like,
Okay.
you say I'm not going to, you say I'm going to, like, deny you, but, like, no, I'm going to lay my life down for you. Like, he swore. He was so certain. And then the second someone asked him, and then, the first denial here, where if we're looking at verse 15, Simon Peter and another disciple was following Jesus. Because this disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the high priest's courtyard. But Peter had to wait outside at the door. So he's like lingering at the door to not go in, right? The other disciple who was known to the high priest came back, spoke to the girl on duty there, and brought Peter in. Right? So he's kind of like hiding out at the door and doesn't even want to go in because he doesn't want to be seen with him.
Well, he wasn't allowed to go in.
Why?
Because the other disciple he was with knew the high priest. That's why he was allowed to go in. I was confused by that too, but after reading it several times,
Okay.
And then he comes back out to get Peter because, hey, I know the guy,
Okay.
he's allowed to come in. But then Peter does deny that he knows Jesus. And if he didn't deny, there's a good chance that he could have got caught up in the crowd and would have been murdered with Jesus. It's quite possible. But Jesus didn't want him to get murdered, right? Jesus wanted him to deny. Like, he needed him to deny because he had bigger plans for Peter. And, Jesus, like you say in the story, what's happening right now, Jesus is being arrested. Mm-hmm. He's about to get crucified. But what happens later? He comes back, right? He comes back. And then after that, the faith of the disciples is much more solidified, right? Like he tells at the end of the last chapter, during his prayer, he's like, these guys are ready. I'm sorry, it was the chapter before the prayer when the disciples were like, now we understand, we get it, we follow you. And Jesus agrees, like, yes, you do get it.
And you
now
don't
you
have
do
to
believe.
ask any more questions.
Right. Yeah. And so then he prays for him, and the story goes on, and then Jesus is arrested, and so he's fulfilling what he's told the disciples. I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to die. I'm going to go away. They're kind of like seeing it actually play out now. They're like, oh my gosh. And then he does die, which we'll get to, but the story goes on, and then they're able to, they see Jesus after he's been murdered come back to them. So at that point, then Peter does have the faith to be able to die for him, right? He goes on and acts, and he does discipleship things that, and he does end up getting martyred for Christ at some point. I don't think it's in the Bible, though. I don't think the story of Peter's death is in the Bible. I don't think it is. But anyway, my only point was that the only thing I wanted to say was that there's more to the story. And at the end of the day, I think Peter does fulfill what he says to Jesus. And he says, I will die for you. But he doesn't do it now.
Right. Which brings me back to my very first point. Like, it's so easy for me to read this and be like, oh, why did you do that? But, like, I know the whole story. I know the end of it. Mm-hmm. I know what's going to happen. And I feel like, again, it's so easy for us to just read these words on a page and think of it as like a story. But think about literally putting yourself in that situation.
It's cold.
Yeah, it's cold outside. It's dark.
There's all night.
People there with weapons, and this guy's ear gets cut off. Like, if you literally saw someone take a sword and cut someone's ear off, like, I'm out. I'm not sticking around. I don't know what else is going to happen. But I imagine, obviously, besides this girl at the door here, most of the people around are all men, is my guess.
Yeah. Usually it's men. Around.
So the only other kind of observation or thing that I wrote down, this just came to mind, and I've said this before, God is, these are not my words. This is something that Lisa Turkhurst writes in her books. She's the president of Proverbs 31 Ministries. She says, God is who he says he is, and he will do what he says he's going to do, right? God is who he says he is. He will do what he says he's going to do. So Peter said he was going to do something and didn't do it, right? Like, God never fails us. He is who he says he is. He is, I am he, right? He is Jesus of Nazareth, right? He is the king. He is who he says he is. and he does what he says he's going to do. All of us can say we're going to do things and try our best, but like we're going to fail, we're going to mess up. But we, kind of like the conversation we were having at a different Bible study last night, like we're going to continue to try to run that race and do the right thing, even though we're going to mess up and we're going to fail. So my last thought was, if we or I truly believe in God, would I stick with him? Because we would know and believe his ways are better than ours. Like, am I going to stick with him? If I truly believe, are you going to stick with him? Because we know that his ways and his path is better than ours. That is all that I have.
Mama said that Jesus knew how the events would play out and what his followers would do and say.
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and it makes sense that as though Peter failed, but I don't see it that way.
I mean, yes, Jesus knew what he was going to do, but he still made this promise to Jesus, like, yeah, I'm gonna. What were his words? It's in chapter 13. He said, "I will lay down my life for you." Right? He's saying he's going to do something, and he doesn't do it. And my point is that, like, we all say things, and it doesn't always get done, right?
I thought he does, though.
But not right now.
Not right now. Not in this story. No. This was a chance for him to lay down his life.
And like, how many times in public or whatever, in a group of friends or whatever, has something of this nature come up, and we might tend to shy away because we're afraid how people are going to react, what they might say, when, like, if we really believe this,
and it may not be a matter of life and death.
Exactly. That's my point. It's
for what you believe.
Exactly. So again, I guess you're understanding what I'm saying now. Like, it might not be life or death for us, but if we truly believe this and like hold to this faith, we should be able to boldly make statements and not shy away from them or, hide outside the door. That's all. And it's not easy. I'm not saying that. It's not easy. It's hard. All of this is a challenge. And I know that that's why these words are in here, because I believe that if something was easy to do, God wouldn't ask us to do it. He's asking us to do something because it's hard and it's not easy. If it was easy, he wouldn't have to remind us and tell us to do it.
Speaking of something that's hard to do, what Jesus did in this chapter was interesting that I took note of in verse 4. There's other stories when they come and Judas kisses Jesus. I guess you could kind of make the same case because Jesus just lets Judas come and kiss him, right? So it's kind of like he's offering himself up there. But in verse 4, he says he walks up to the crowd. They're coming with weapons. He knows they're the Roman guard, right? So he's like, well, we can't fight these guys. This is it. It's happening now. And he doesn't shy away and wait for it. He approaches them and asks them, who do you want? Right? He knows what they want.
Right.
He knows what they're coming for, but he goes out and steps into God's will for his life.
Yeah.
Right. The hard thing to do is what he chooses to do. And I just thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And in verse 8 and 9, he does that. He's doing this for a couple of reasons, I think. One is because he's stepping into God's will, but two is because he's trying to protect his disciples. Because it says here in verse 8 and 9, Jesus answered. So he's asking them a couple of times, who are you looking for? It's kind of like a salesman. A good salesman will ask questions whereby the buyer will say what the salesman wants the buyer to say, right? So instead of asking them, how much do you want to pay for this car? They'll say, what do you want to pay a month or something, right? So they'll know what they want. So Jesus is saying, who do you want? Who do you want? And we want Jesus. Okay, well, if you want Jesus, then you don't need these guys, right? Like, he's basically closing the deal and trying to protect his disciples. And he just like prayed about that the chapter before. What was it? Chapter 17, verse 12, when he's talking to God about his disciples. He says, while I was with them, I protected them and kept them safe by the name you gave me. None has been lost except the one doomed to destruction, so that scripture would be fulfilled. And yes, he's praying, and he's telling God that I'm going to take care of them. I'm going to protect them. But I guess, is he also asking? I don't know. I guess there's not a question mark there. So, but he's actually doing it. He's actually protecting his disciples right here in this case, because the Roman guard could very easily just wrap them all up and take them, right? But they don't. And I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And then you got to go?
I have something at 8 I have to do.
Oh, that's right, you do.
Yeah.
Okay, and then the last thing is, I forgot about that. In this section, Peter is named as the disciple who cuts off the guy's ear, and Malachus is named as the dude who got his ear cut off.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no talk of healing the guy in this section, but in Luke they do talk about it. They don't give the names of who chops off the ear and whose ear gets chopped off. But Luke is the only gospel where it says, and then Jesus fixed his ear. And I feel like that's a bigger deal than, here's your ear and I put it back on your head. It's kind of nuts.
Yeah.
But Luke is a doctor, so his gospel has more healing stuff in it because of that, which is an interesting little fact.
Yeah. All right. It says, I like verse 6 when the soldiers are expecting to need force, and Jesus says, I am he.
Yeah.
So.
And they're like, okay, this is it. This is an easy night. All right.
All right. Well, I'd love to chat more. I gotta go.
Just gonna walk away.
I'm not gonna walk away.
I'll pray and then we can close
Yes.
out. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for this time, God. I pray for this word that you've spoken to us. I pray that we can get something out of it and learn something from you. Thank you for Jesus's leading on how to step into what it is that you have for us in our lives. And it's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.
All right. Thanks for joining us. They drew back and fall down. They can't believe it. Yeah, I agree. All right. Have a great night. Sorry to cut it short at the end, but we'll do chapter 19 next week. Hope to see you.
Or maybe more of 18. But we'll figure it out. We'll do something next week.
19.
Bye-bye.
Bye.